It was quiet, too quiet. The kind of silence that doesn't feel peaceful, but planned. The kind of silence that only happens before something structural shifts beneath the surface. That's what November felt like for AFX. No major announcements, no official roadmap updates. The price, flat, the charts, barely moving. To the average retail eye, it looked like a forgotten coin, a relic from a cycle long gone. But they weren't watching close enough. Because something was asterisk moving, just not where most people were looking. The shift didn't begin with a tweet. It began with a validator. One based in Singapore, a node that hadn't pulsed in over 6 months, quietly came online again. Not alone. 3 others joined within 48 hours, all from Asia-Pacific regions. One from Hong Kong, one from Taipei, one buried behind a VPN that pinged between Malaysia and Japan. No announcements, no status alerts, just cold infrastructure coming to life. And while most dismissed it as routine maintenance, a few on-chain watchers knew better. Because shortly after those validators lit up, something else changed. Bridge activity. Not volume, not traffic. Structure. A new contract silently deployed. Vault Bridge init. It didn't go viral. No influencers mentioned it, but its metadata and, more importantly, its timestamp revealed the truth. AFX wasn't just upgrading. It was connecting. Not to hype, but to something real asterisk. Then came the PDF. A regulatory document, dry, corporate, the kind of file no one reads unless they're specifically looking for it. But buried on page 14, a list of sandbox digital asset APIs approved for testing by a Hong Kong-based fintech firm. Most were familiar: Chainlink, Ripple, one obscure protocol from the Cosmos ecosystem. But then 3 letters. AFX. No explanation, no branding, no link, just the name sitting in between massive players. It was there for 2 days before the PDF was taken down. But someone archived it, and the archive began to spread, quietly, like a secret too dangerous to talk about loudly, but too important to ignore. That's when the Whisper network started again. AFX wasn't dead. It was hiding, not from failure, but from regulation. Because if AFX had indeed made it into a Hong Kong pilot, even as a test module, that would explain everything. The silence, the validator reactivations, the bridge logic, the custom RPC endpoints pinging only in Southeast Asia. This wasn't a token prepping for Moon Boys. This was infrastructure, silent, surgical, strategic. One post on an underground forum broke it down like this. If you're watching the chart, you think AFX is sleeping. If you're watching the chain, you know it's wide awake. Meanwhile, back on the Explorer, someone noticed a series of transactions tagged with the memo. Asterisk root test HK21 asterisk. Each transaction sent a small amount, 8.64 tokens. A number that longtime AFX watchers know was the original line count of its mainnet smart contract. Coincidence? Or breadcrumb? Because around the same time, a custom RPC node, AFXcore.net, came online in a Hong Kong cloud region. It responded only to internal queries. No UI, no public dashboard. Just proxy active true. Someone somewhere was using it. Not testing it. Using it. And then came the kicker. A multi-sig wallet that hadn't been touched in over a year reauthorized a signer. That signer deployed a single contract titled Pulse Watcher. No token, no transfer function, no flashy interface. Just one job: watching AFX, BSC, and Polygon bridges. And it was hosted under a company that once attempted a payments corridor between Seoul and Hong Kong, before regulators shut them down in 2023. Now they were watching again. Not tweeting. not announcing, just watching. AFX wasn't building for retail anymore, if it ever was. It was building rails, bridges, invisible pipes beneath the next financial layer. And the silence, that was the strategy. Because sometimes the projects worth fearing most are the ones that don't need to say a word. If part one was about signals, part two is about meaning. The why behind the silence, the bridge tests, the reactivated validators, and the sudden appearance of AFX inside a Hong Kong sandbox document. Because the truth is this: when Hong Kong tests a digital asset, they're not interested in hype. They're not looking at Twitter followers, influencer endorsements, or YouTube price predictions. They want something boring, predictable, compliant, something that can sit inside a regulatory sandbox without embarrassing anyone, something that doesn't explode, rug, or pump randomly because a whale sneezes on chain. They want infrastructure. And that's exactly what AFX has quietly become. The first clue came not from AFX itself, but from Hong Kong. Over the past year, HKMA has been positioning itself as a global Web3 testing hub. They want to attract projects that can support cross-border settlements, digital payments, and tokenized asset flows, not hype coins, rails. So when AFX appeared in that PDF, even if by mistake it wasn't a coincidence, it was a placement, a slot, a test module selected for its architecture, not its popularity. And this is where things get interesting. The rumored Hong Kong CEX listing for AFX makes sense now. Not for exposure, not for speculation, but because any token used in a regulated testing environment needs compliant liquidity routes. They can't push transactions through backdoor DEX routes or gray market swaps. They need traceability, KYC-adjacent rails, clean order books. That's what a Hong Kong listing gives AFX. Not hype, a regulatory on-ramp. And when you look at it like that, everything starts to click. Those validator nodes lighting up, they weren't reactivated for show. They were aligning with regional availability zones, building redundancy for cross-border tests. The Vault BridgeInit contract, not a DeFi toy, a settlement hook. The PulseWatcher contract, not a bot, a compliance observer. The tiny 8.64 test transactions, they weren't random. They were heartbeat pings, micro-routing tests used by sandbox simulations to measure speed, latency, and reliability. This wasn't a project prepping for a bull run. This was a project prepping for integration. And like all serious integrations, it had to move in silence. Because retail hype would ruin everything. If the price pumped, the metrics would warp, liquidity would distort, testing would break, and worst of all, regulators would lose interest. For AFX to succeed, it needed to remain invisible. A quiet bridge for a loud world. But the biggest confirmation didn't come from code or validators. It came from the chain's oldest wallet, the Genesis signer. The one wallet believed to belong to one of the original architects of AFX. The wallet that hadn't moved in years. It woke up just long enough to send a single memo. Asterisk layer online, let them find us. Not we're live. Not big announcement coming. Not partnership revealed. Just a statement of state. Layer online. A phrase only builders understand. It means the infrastructure is no longer theory, it's active, running, functional. Then the second line. Let them find us. Not chasing attention, not begging for adoption, not pumping price for exit liquidity. The opposite. AFX is building so deeply into the foundation of the next wave of digital finance that it doesn't need to market itself. If Hong Kong's pilot projects use it, even in tiny ways, the right people will find it. The right institutions will integrate it. The right builders will adopt it. Because real infrastructure doesn't announce itself. Roads don't brag. Bridges don't tweet. Pipes don't hold AMAs. They just work. And when the new ecosystem rises on top of them, only then does the world turn around and say, wait, what's underneath all of this? And that's when they find AFX. Not as a coin, not as a hype project, but as a layer. A quiet, invisible, essential layer. So when retail investors look at the chart today and say, AFX is dead, the irony is almost poetic, because they're looking at price, not purpose. They're watching noise, not movement. They're waiting for announcements while the chain is already speaking. AFX doesn't need to convince the world anymore. It just needs to continue what November started. Silent validation, hidden integration, institutional attention without institutional spotlight. When Hong Kong publishes its next pilot results, when the sandbox expands, when cross-border corridors activate between HK and SG, someone will eventually ask, how did this move so smoothly? And one quiet answer will sit beneath it all. AFX was already there, waiting, watching, connecting, the quiet bridge no one saw coming, until it was too late to be early.